Welcome to Begin, Build, Blossom, your business journey with Clarita, the podcast where we will discuss valuable insights, resources, and motivation to fuel your entrepreneurial spirit. Let's build a supportive community together. Subscribe now to Begin, Build, Blossom, and let's embark on your business journey. Welcome to another episode of our podcast, Begin, Build, Blossom. And I'm wondering, have you ever wondered what it's like to run an accounting firm? We have today Randy Hughes with us. Randy Hughes III is the chairman and CEO of Pennies, LLC, a boutique private accounting firm that provides business advisory, bookkeeping, tax resolution, and tax planning services. Its clients range from individuals and entrepreneurs to small businesses poised for growth. As an enrolled agent, Randy is a federally licensed tax practitioner with unlimited rights to practice and represent taxpayers before the IRS. In addition, he is also a certified public accountant, certified tax coach, and certified tax resolution specialist. Randy was a standout scholar in the Leadership Education and Development Business Program at the University of Michigan at Ann Arbor. Later, he graduated from Robert H. Smith School of Business at the University of Maryland with a bachelor's in accounting in December of 2000. Randy has also served in financial leadership roles in the hospitality industry as a controller in both centralized and decentralized accounting settings. In 2009, he left the corporate world to devote his efforts to growing Pennies, LLC into a full-service accounting firm and to give back through volunteer work for his community. He is fluent in American Sign Language and enjoys teaching and traveling the world with his wife, Renee. Welcome, Randy. Thank you so much for joining us.
What a lovely introduction. Thank you very much, Clarita. Thank you so much for having me on the program and for that very nice introduction.
You're most welcome. And I know it's tax season for you, so I really appreciate you taking time out to be with us today.
Hey, not a problem. Happy to be here. I consider it to be a privilege and an honor to be with you and with all of your listeners. So thank you for the invite.
Okay, so we are going to start out with a section we call Rapid Fire. Here we are going to ask you a few questions and we'll try to get some quick responses. If you feel the need to expound on anything, though, please go ahead and do so.
All right, sounds good.
So I would like to get two words from you, one that described you as a child and one that describes you now.
As a child, focused. I would say now, experienced.
Oh, I like that. Focused experience. Great. And tell us the name of your business and what you do.
The name of the business, Counting Pennies, which I absolutely love that business name. If I were to sum it up in just a few words, I would say we help people to make, save, and keep their money. That's basically what we do.
And everybody I know loves to do that. So that's
Right.
amazing. And you mentioned the name. Tell us a little bit about the name.
It captures what we do for sure. But as far as how it came about, when I started this business years ago, that was not the original name, ironically. Initially, it was called Hughes Works. So my last name with the word works at the end of it. And basically, it was a situation where I realized I wanted to start business. I needed a name. I was trying to brainstorm what would be a good name because, you're thinking there's going to be marketing, there's going to be advertising, this is how people are going to know you. This is how they're going to be able to identify with you and who you are. So you want to try to get it right. Nothing was really coming. So I ended up going with that. And I wasn't really in love with it, but it worked for the time, But I think it was about 2 years in, I'm sitting there with my wife and I can't remember what we were doing, but I just remember I had an aha moment. And I just blurted it out to her. I said, what about counting pennies? And, it was one of those things where we weren't talking about names.
Right.
We were doing something else. But when I said that, she immediately knew what I was talking about. She was like, I love it. So I went in and, back then the internet was it was a little younger than it is now, but we still had search engines. I think this was pre-Google. I think this was I think Yahoo was the major search engine at the time. And I remember typing it in to see if anybody else was using the name and
Hmm.
could not believe that nobody else was using it. So we made the change, changed up all the marketing, and here we are today.
Nice. Later on, it would be great if we can talk a little bit about the kind of things that go into changing the name. And I know you dated the business a little bit just now when you said about Yahoo
Mm,
pre-Google. So can you tell us how long you've been in business?
absolutely. Yeah. 22 years now.
Congratulations. That's
Thank you very
amazing.
much. Yes, absolutely.
And what were you doing before you started your business?
Well, I was working in corporate America, like many of us are trained to do when we go through high school and college. And so I was doing that. I had a desire to work for myself, but hadn't landed on any ideas at the time. And so I was, I had a traditional job. So I was doing that, and I was also doing volunteer work, as you mentioned in the intro, which I still do today, I might add. So those were the two things that I was kind of focused on prior to getting the business started.
Great. And since you started the business, what would you say has been your biggest achievement so far?
The biggest achievement so far, I would say that the biggest achievement is growing the business to where it is with part-time folks. Because one of the staples of our business is capacity of creativity, work life balance, spending time on the more important things. And so, one of the ways we accomplish that in our practice is through part time work. So, it starts with me, I work part time, and then all of our team members have part time schedules. And so, to be where we are today and to have done it with part time schedules, to me, I think is the biggest. I'm most proud of that. If I had to nail it down to one thing, there's a lot of things I'm proud of, but I think that is probably the biggest thing.
Wow, that sounds good. And I know we sometimes talk about going into business so that we don't work more, but we sometimes end up doing that. So to hear that you've actually achieved that, not having to work, already not working full time and being able to do things outside of work, I think that is
Hmm.
quite an achievement. So congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you very, very much. Yeah.
Great. And on the flip side of that, what would you say has been maybe your lowest low in business so far?
I would have to say, if I had to pin down the top struggle when it comes to business, is I would have to say maybe growing a team, because while part time is a great achievement, as a business grows, it becomes more and more difficult to service more clients with the same type of attention that they deserve when you're working part time. So at that particular point, you have to make a decision. Am I going to change this model? Am I going to go from part time to full time? Or am I going to reduce the number of clients that I service so that I can focus on those individuals within these part time schedules?
That gives me something to think about. So thanks for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Yes. And what is one book you'd recommend that we read?
I actually have two, if you don't mind. And the reason is because we work with anyone, of course, but what we've noticed is that women tend to be attracted to the offerings that we have here at Counting Pennies, whether it's getting their taxes done, whether it's planning to lower their tax liability, whether it's learning some of the education initiatives that we do here. Women seem to be attracted to the offerings. And there's a number of reasons, I think, for that. But because we realize that women are our ideal client or have become our ideal client, one book that I absolutely would recommend is The Confidence Code. It's an outstanding book. It's written by Claire Shipman, Jill Riley, and Patty Kay. And it's a book that's written obviously by women from a woman's perspective. And it addresses challenges that are unique to women, particularly in the environment that we've all grown up in, and how they can break through some of the barriers that have been set before them and make a success of their business and anything else that they're working on. And I found that that particular book is probably the biggest gem that I could recommend. But for anyone to read,
Hmm.
in addition to that,
Hmm.
I would recommend What Your CPA Isn't Telling You. Now, that might sound like a book just for accountants, but I assure you it is not. Anyone who's interested in business, anyone who is their own person, who owns their own business, what your CPA isn't telling you is an excellent book. It doesn't teach you how to be an accountant, and it doesn't use a lot of accounting terms. It speaks to you. It's from the perspective. It's written by an accountant, but it's written from the vantage point of his experiences before he was an accountant, right? And things that he thought he knew that his CPA back then told him, and what he ended up discovering later on in life. And it's a really nice basis for anyone who's trying to start a business, because the reality is all of us are trying to make a living
Mm-hmm.
so that, as you mentioned, we can spend more time with our family and doing other things. And some of the things that are mentioned in that book help us to know what those things are
Mm-hmm.
so that we can be aware of them, so that we can put them in place. So I would say those two books would be the ones that I would recommend.
And as a woman, I am actually one of your clients in terms of
That's right.
your mentorship program. And I will say that being part of the program has really helped me to get started and to grow. I've mentioned that in previous podcasts that, I reached out to many people while I'm trying to get this business off the ground. And you're one of those persons through your program. So maybe that would be a good time to tell us a little bit about your program.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. So the program is called the Well-Rounded Accountant, as you know. And basically, what the program endeavors to do is it endeavors to provide exposure to what we consider to be the five areas of accounting, right? So you have tax preparation, tax planning, tax resolution, bookkeeping, and then CFO advisory services. In a nutshell, this is basically what the taxpayers and the business owners of America are in the biggest need of. So the well-rounded accountant attempts to endeavors to teach accountants these five basic areas. Now, some accountants are going to be interested in more than one area, but what we try to focus on in the course is exposing you to all five and then picking a specific niche for you to focus on as your specialty, right? So, this is the thing that I do. This is the area that I specialize in, because the reality is when we specialize in something, people are usually drawn to us because of that specialty. Let's use an example. Let's say that you have a heart problem. Okay, you go to the doctor, you're feeling palpitations, you realize something might be wrong, right? You could go to a general doctor, but you would probably feel more confident getting recommendations from a heart doctor, from a cardiologist. Why? Because that's that person's specialty. But you also want to make sure that the cardiologist understands other things that you might be dealing with. Like, for example, if they're only focused on their specialty and they're giving you medication based on their assessment, but they haven't taken into consideration that you might have diabetes, that you might have kidney problems, that you might have something else that you're dealing with in your life, and they're just zeroed in just on their specialty, well, that doesn't really give you confidence either. And it's kind of very similar with the course. It's important to be well rounded, to be aware of these areas so that you understand how your specialty works in conjunction with those other things. And then, should you decide later on to specialize in a second area, fine. But if not, then you know how to provide direction for your clients so that they can seek the things that they know. And some of that is just being aware of what's out there, so that you know how to direct your clients. And so there's training that's provided for that. And then, as you know, I think, in my opinion, the best part of the course is when you go into the real life application. The real life application of the course is when you take all these things that you've learned in the course, and now you get a chance to apply it in real life. So, okay, I learned how to do this. Now, how do I sit in front of a client on Zoom, for example, or on a telephone call and explain this to them? How do I help them through this particular situation? And the real life application, you give an opportunity to observe how it's done from someone who has experience in that particular area. But then you also get help with your own clients so that you can navigate through that as it relates to that specific specialty. So hopefully that wasn't too long of an answer, but that's basically the course in a nutshell.
No, thank you for telling us more about it. And yeah, if there are accountants out there looking to start their own firm, I would definitely say it's a good program to be part of. And through the program, I also got exposure to the books that you mentioned, and I will say that those were very great reads, and I would recommend them to others as well. So thanks for sharing that.
Yes, you're welcome. Absolutely.
So let's focus a little bit on the beginning part of your journey. So do you remember the first time you actually thought about starting a business?
Yeah, and ironically, it was after college, after spending 4 years of being told to go out and work in corporate.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that I wanted to work for myself. I didn't like this schedule of a corporate, I didn't like the feel of the corporate position. I had to do it. That's what I was groomed to do for 4 years in college, but I didn't like the way it felt. I liked the idea of being able to work from my home through the power of the internet and get things done if it could be done in a safe and secure way. That was really what my goal was. So coming out of college, I started looking for opportunities that would allow me to work part-time and part-time from home for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Ironically, though, I didn't start, I majored in accounting in school,
Mm-hmm.
but when I started looking for opportunities, I was not looking in accounting, ironically. I was looking for other business ventures. And for me, I didn't quite put together how to put together an accounting practice. I knew accounting,
Mm-hmm.
I knew book accounting, I should say,
Right.
but I didn't know how that translated into a business in those early years. And so I was trying my hand in other things. And I felt somewhat comfortable doing that because I saw my father do it. My father was a business owner, but you're still trying to deal with the complications of how do I get clients? Are they going to have confidence in me? Am I going to be able to deliver the way that I say I'm going to be able to deliver? All of the things that all of us who are in business go through. I went through that. And you think about those things, and those were the things that were on my mind at the time. But yeah, it was about that time in my life when I started thinking about business.
Okay. And you mentioned that your dad was a businessman. So can you tell us more about your upbringing and how that led to this time in your journey?
Yeah, it's kind of funny looking back at where things are now and the connections with family history. My father was a business owner. He was a State Farm. He owned a State Farm agency, as a matter of fact. So he sold insurance, very successful insurance agency that he had. And I saw him. I saw him having individuals work for him. I saw him having to find office space. I saw him getting up and leaving for work and coming back in the afternoon. I saw all those things. He had to make payroll. He had to make sure that the lights stayed on and those types of things. And then he still had the family that he had to take care of. And there were four of us,
Hmm.
I got a chance to see that from the child's perspective, my father putting that together. It made more sense though when I became an adult, all the things that went into what he had to do. But that was a good perspective. Now, on the other hand, you had my mom. My mother comes from an education background. So both of my mother's parents were teachers in primary school and in high school. So they come from an education background. That rubbed off on my mother, and my mother had one job. She went to college and she came out of college and she had one job her entire career. She spent 40 years working at Howard University as a professor there and as an administrator there. So, coming from that background, it's interesting to me that now in my accounting practice, which requires me to be a business owner like my father, but there's this element of education, teaching others how to do things a certain way, teaching others how to help, even when it comes to our clients who are not accountants, making sure that they understand their tax return. So, not just saying, hey, you owe $3,000. We did your tax return and you owe $3,000,
Hmm.
but helping them to understand why they owe $3,000, understanding what they can do to make sure it doesn't happen again the following year, teaching them the items that they need to know. So my parents' background kind of converged in me, and so I feel like I have a little piece of both of them in what I do now.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. When you decided to start the business, can you tell us some of the steps that you took to actually get that done?
Yeah, so it was tough starting off. because you got to come up with ideas and you got to run with them, and you don't know if they're going to work or not. So for me, when I actually made the decision to start this particular business, because I had worked another business, but it failed. But going through that process was good because it helped me. I went through some growing pains, but I got a chance to learn some things about what it was like to be in business, but I also learned some things about myself. So now you transition over into this opportunity, and I decided I wanted to prepare taxes. Well, the first thing I did is I went and took a tax course. Now, you might be thinking, why would you take a tax course? You just spent 4 years in accounting in college. But the accounting they teach you in college is how to go and take that and go work for some Fortune 500 company in the corporate America. I'm now working for myself, preparing taxes, something they did not teach in the business school that I went to. So I took this tax course, learned a ton about how to prepare taxes, and I actually did very well in the class. So well that when I got done with the class, they offered me a position as a tax preparer. But a friend of mine gave me a heads up. They said, if you do well in the class, they're going to offer you a position to work with them. Don't sign that agreement, because what they're not telling you, and she was absolutely correct, is when you sign an agreement to work with one of these firms that teaches tax courses, specifically preparation courses, there is usually a provision in there that says you're not allowed to set up your own practice for at least 2 years, because they don't want you to become their competition. So that makes sense. But that's exactly what I wanted to do, right? I wanted to work for myself.
Right.
So sure enough, that offer came. I turned it down. But now I have to go out there and get my own business. So Clarita, you know what I did? I created flyers on my computer, designed them, printed, went off to like a Office Depot or a Staples, I can't remember which, and I printed off a bunch of flyers, maybe 200, 300 of them. And then I put them on the cars in the parking lot of an apartment complex. And do you know why I did that? Because starting off, even though I had done well in class, I did not have enough confidence to prepare what's called a Schedule A. That's part of a tax return when a person owns a home. I didn't know how to prepare. I knew how to prepare a Schedule A, but I had never been paid to prepare a Schedule A. And I was so nervous of messing up someone's tax return. I said, I'm going to focus on apartment complexes, because the fact that individuals are in an apartment complex means they don't own a home. So I won't have, and usually that's the schedule you prepare if a person owns a home. So I said, that's what I'm going to do. So that's how I got started, is putting flyers on the cars of apartment complexes.
So I'm guessing that's how you got your very first client?
That's how I got my very first client. Yes, it is.
And in terms of what you needed to serve that first client, what was the equipment or software, would you say, that you needed to get that off the ground?
So tax software, you have to have tax software to be able to prepare the taxes, right? And you have to have an office. You have to have a place for a person to meet you. Because back then we didn't have Zoom, right? We didn't have video conferencing like we had today. So, things were in person. And, it's funny. I think back to it now and I kind of shake my head, but I was working out of I lived in an apartment. I was working out of a 2-bedroom apartment that we had, newly married. We had only been married maybe a year and a half. It's a 2-bedroom apartment. We converted one of the rooms into an office. And literally, I had people coming into my apartment and going to the room where I set up my office. And that's where we would have the tax interview so that I could prepare their taxes. And when I think about it now, I don't know. I wouldn't do that today. Let me put it that way.
I'm trying to think about it. I don't know. I think I've thought about doing that, but actually doing it.
Yeah.
But it's amazing the things you do, right? And it works out.
It did work out. I kept that arrangement for the first 2 years.
2 years, wow.
Yeah, I kept it for 2 years, and then I went out and I got an office space. I started running an office space because I was nervous about people coming into my home knowing where I live.
Right.
Especially as a newly married man. So I eventually got an office space and I worked out of there, and it continued to go well. And then probably about 6 or 7 years in, I started making the transition towards a paperless business, where everything was handled electronically. Everything was handled, by that point, there had been advances in technology. Things were more secure online. So setting up online portals, that people had to log into to send documents. That was becoming more and more standard. So I started making the transition. It was a hybrid situation for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think it was in 2007, 2008, 2009 when I went 100% virtual or 100% no more in person, which worked out because, years later when COVID hit,
Mm-hmm.
there was no impact from an operational standpoint.
Yeah, you said that, and I'm thinking that's before everybody was thinking about being virtual. You had already done that.
That's right. Yeah.
That's very forward thinking.
It worked out.
Right. And that brings us nicely to building because you mentioned you had to find a venue. You now had to look at additional software. So just tell us a little bit more about that.
So, as far as the venue was concerned, that was difficult because, I didn't want to go into a space that I had to commit to for a long period of time. Because sometimes business leases can be like 2 years. You have to commit to 2 years.
Mm.
And many times they want you to lease year round, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't want an arrangement like that because I'm a tax guy. I don't have very many clients. I'm just starting off. I just need something for tax season.
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly, the model that I was interested in trying to pattern myself after was what I saw Jackson Hewitt doing. Jackson Hewitt is a firm that prepares taxes, and they had made an arrangement with Walmart to come into the Walmart stores and set up a specific area, and they would just be there from January to April. From the end of January to mid April, they were able to come in and rent out a little space in Walmart because they're thinking, which I think was a brilliant idea, actually. I mean, we all know the traffic that Walmart generates, right? People are going to come in to do their shopping. They're going to look over in the corner. They're going to see the little Jackson Hewitt setup. They know they have to do their taxes. So, you know what? I'm going to come in. I'm going to drop off my tax forms. I'm going to go do my Walmart shopping.
Mm-hmm.
And then by the time I get done, my return should be done. It was a brilliant idea.
Yeah, for sure.
And they didn't have to rent office space year round. They found a vendor who was already there, rented from them for the time that they needed, and then when tax season was over, they were done. So I said, how can I can't go to Walmart. That's what I was thinking. But how can I use this same model? And I did. I found an office space. I said, hey, so I thought about insurance agents, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Insurance agents have people coming in and out to buy in policies. I was probably thinking about that because of my background with my dad. But do you have an extra space in your office that I can just use for 3 months? I'll pay you rent. You get a little extra income, and then I have a place where I can work.
Mm-hmm.
Could I find someone else that would be willing to allow me to rent out their space? Because once you get that idea, then it's like, oh, it doesn't have to be an insurance agent. Maybe it could be someone else. So I did that, and I was able to find that, and I kept that arrangement for 2 years. And that was a huge help because it got people out of my home coming to my home that I didn't really know. Because remember, I'm putting out flyers. It's not like I was getting referrals. I'm putting out flyers. So anybody was coming to my home. So now I had this other arrangement, which I liked a little bit better, a little bit more professional too.
Mm-hmm.
That worked out really, really nicely. But you had to have the tax software. That was the second part of your question.
Mm-hmm.
So in the course that I went through, they taught us how to prepare taxes by hand, which I think every tax preparer needs to learn how to do. You have to know the basics, the intricacies of how to prepare a tax return. If you later then get a software who does a lot of the heavy lifting for you, that's fine. But when you learn how to do it by hand,
Mm-hmm.
you know what the software is doing. And once you know what the software is doing, it helps you with other things. It helps you with tax planning,
Mm-hmm.
for example. It helps you to catch errors. If you know what the software is doing, you can go in and manipulate things when you're not getting the type of result that you're looking for because the software has made an error,
Mm-hmm.
because software does make errors. So when you learn how to do things by hand from scratch, it gives you, in my opinion, a broader knowledge of what you're working on, and it helps you to be able to put out fires and solve problems a lot easier
Mm-hmm.
than just relying on the software 100%. But that being said, I 100% recommend using software because it speeds up the process. It does reduce, the potential for mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that you want to make sure that you understand what it's doing, and preparing from scratch early in your career helps you to do that.
Okay. And if there is someone who's trying to start off a practice right now, with especially if a focus on taxes, would you have recommendations as to which software to use?
Yes. So tax software, one that well, it depends on their setup.
Mm-hmm.
If they're interested in a desktop version, Drake software,
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion, hands down is the best one out there. They have an excellent product. They have outstanding customer service.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the talk. I've mentioned I've been in business for 22 years. That's the tax software that I used for the first 17 or 18 years. The only reason that I'm not with Drake right now is because I got to a point in my business where I could no longer prepare all of the tax returns myself and I needed to get help. And the help that I was able to secure did not live where I lived. They lived in other states. So a desktop version was not going to help them because they weren't going to be able to access that. So I needed a cloud based version. And the cloud based version that Drake had at the time was not compatible or conducive to the needs that we have. I think that since then, maybe their online or cloud based product has improved,
Mm-hmm.
but at the time, it was not what we needed. And as a result, I had to go out and search for something that was cloud based. For those that are looking for cloud based solutions, we use My Tax Prep Office. We also use Intuit ProConnect. Both of those I would highly recommend. ProConnect is more on the pricey side.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to be mindful of that if you're thinking about cloud based. But the beauty of the cloud base is no matter where your team lives, and maybe even more importantly, no matter where you are,
Mm-hmm.
you'll be able to access those tax returns because they're hidden. I mean, because they're housed in the cloud. So they go anywhere that you go. You don't have to have your computer like you would with a desktop version of Drake.
Right.
You can do it anywhere.
Well, thank you. And you mentioned team. Like, how did you decide, okay, now is the time I need to grow my team? And when you decided to do that, what are the things you considered to build that team?
That's an excellent question. So first, let me mention that I initially had a resistance to building a team because I was trying to save money, right? And aren't really all of us trying to do that, especially when we start business? We're trying to manage our finances. And to me, adding on team members meant I had to pay payroll. And I was like, how am I going to pay somebody else to do what I'm doing?
Mm-hmm.
I know what the rates are. I know what the going rates are out there. How am I going to be able to afford that, especially when I've just started my business? So I resisted the idea for a long time. What eventually got me started in building a team was actually, to be honest with you, it was a recommendation of my wife. She was like, you got to get yourself an admin person. Now, she understood the value of administrative and executive assistant work because she spent a lot of her career as an executive assistant, working for high level individuals. She was the executive assistant for guys that were making, billions of dollars, literally. Some of the corporations that she worked for, she was on Wall Street and in DC and things of that nature. But she knew the value of an assistant, having that type of assistance. She finally convinced me to use someone that she had been using in her business who was doing very, very well. And so I finally brought that person on. I said, okay, I can't pay much, but this is what I can do. She was fine with that at that particular time. Her situation was conducive to, it was a very part time position because I couldn't pay somebody full time at the time.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't want full time because she had other responsibilities she was taking care of. So it ended up being a happy marriage between the two of us, a happy working marriage between the two of us, and that as it related to that. But let me tell you, Clarita, when she came in and she started handling invoicing.
Mm-hmm.
So remember, I'm doing everything, right? But now I can prepare the taxes. I had some bookkeeping clients. I didn't have to send the bills now. I would tell her hey, we're going to charge this person this much. Hey, we're going to charge this person that much. She communicated with them. She made sure that the payment came in. There was such a heavy load that came off of me.
Mm-hmm.
I started giving her more things. I was like, this is going great. So I gave her some more. She started knocking it out of the park. Then I gave her more. She's knocking it out of the park. And that's when I was like, I will never be without an assistant. So I usually, and I think from class, I always recommend make sure you're getting your administrative help because what it does is it relieves you of stress that you don't even realize you're carrying,
Mm-hmm.
and it opens up mentally your creative juices and your capacity because you're not thinking about billing and collections and sending this email and going and doing this and going very important things. That's why you were doing them.
Mm-hmm.
But because you no longer have to do them, it frees up your brain power and your mind to be able to do other things that you've been putting off. Many of those things are creative in nature, which would help you to build your business.
Mm-hmm.
So this person is not just doing tasks, they're helping you to be more creative in your business, which is going to help your business to grow. And then as it grows, you make sure you take care of that person by paying them a little bit more because of what they're worth to you now. And then at that point, because you're now more creative, because you have the space to think in a more creative space, now you're attracting more business. That's when you go out and you hire maybe a licensed or another skilled position. I don't like using that word skilled position because it seems to suggest that the admin is not skilled. That absolutely is not the case. That's a skilled position also. But when I say skilled, I mean skilled in the profession that you're working in.
Right.
If you're an accountant, then another accountant. If you're an engineer, then another engineer. A licensed person like that. Now you can bring that type of person in to help you manage the workload that you're trying to accomplish. But your first hire should be an admin for sure. So once I learned those lessons, that's when the team started to grow to what you see today.
And it's interesting that you said that you didn't want to spend money, but then from what I'm hearing, bringing that person on actually allowed you to make more money. So that really worked for you.
That's right. It's and it's the mindset has to be this admin is not a cost to my business. This admin is an investment in my business. And once that clicks in the mindset of the business owner, that's when they start to see more growth because it's an investment. You're going to get a return on your investment. You put money in the stock market. Why? Because somebody's told you and history has shown you that over time, if you leave it there, it's going to grow. It's the exact same thing with an administrative person. You're putting some money in
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to get a whole lot more in return, even if that person's not working on those projects,
Mm-hmm.
because of what it does for you,
Right.
because of the mental space it frees up and the time it frees up for you to work on things that are going to generate extra revenue. And that's exactly what happened once I did it.
And that brings me to mindset change. One thing I'm learning as a new business owner is you really have to do a lot of changes when it comes to the way you think. And that's one of the things we talk about in class as well. Things like you said, it's an investment. It's not just money you're spending. And there is a return on investment after that. So even the way we maybe approach clients, like we're not trying to get a job per se, we're trying to get clients, we're trying to build relationships. That's very, very different from like being an employee to being a business owner. And it's something I'm still learning, and hearing you talk about it actually brings it to the forefront again. So I don't know if you want to touch on that at all. I know you talked about the hiring an admin, but if there's anything else you want to add.
Yeah, mindset is very important. And really what helps with that is trying to think about where your business is, where you want it to be. And one of the things that I heard that is very, very helpful, and I like giving credit for the things that I hear. And right now, I can't remember exactly who said this, so I apologize for that. But one of the things they mention is identify the things that you are uniquely qualified to do. List all of the things that you do, all of the things that you do. And this is an activity that you should do every quarter. Write down everything that you do. I open up email. I read my email. I mean, the tedious stuff. I mean, as simple as it may seem, make a list of all the things you do in your day. And then once you have that list, then take a look at that list again and say, now, which of these things am I uniquely qualified to do? Because there may be some things that we could offload to someone else. There are some things that we do have to do as the business owner
Mm-hmm.
or as the licensed professional in our particular practice. But are we doing things that we're not uniquely qualified to do? And if the answer to that is yes, then say, which of these things can I offload to somebody on my team? If I had an administrative person, maybe you don't have anybody. Well, what could you give to another person if you had one? And then you start identifying those things, and then that sets the basis. That helps you to establish that you have a need, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to get someone who can take these things, because once you start taking things off your list, as we mentioned before, it builds your mental capacity to be able to think, to be creative. Now you can work on other initiatives that you otherwise wouldn't have been able to do. And then as a result of that, then you're able to get more business in. As more business comes in, then you might think about bringing someone in. But of course, all of this is, you have to consider the fact that each individual has to take into consideration how big they want their business to be.
Right.
Not everybody's goal is to be a millionaire. So sometimes the goal is, hey, I want to be able to cover my bills, have a comfortable living. And hey, if I can do that on $100,000, if I can do that on $200,000, I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
If I can do it on less, I'm good. Everybody has a different situation, a different number of kids that they're dealing with, a different part of the country that they live in, and that's fine. But whatever your situation is, what is it that I really, really want? How do I get there? And realizing that I need help to be able to get there, and then systematically offloading things to individuals to give you the mental capacity to think so that you can get to where you want to be. And then once you get there, stop. Stop. Unless there's something else that you're taking into consideration, stop. There's nothing that says that you have to keep adding on and on and on and on. What are your original goals? Your original goal was to spend more time with your son, to spend more time with your daughter. If you are doing that, stop and then maintain. If you're not doing that, then yes, then you have to continue to try to build. But it's an ebb and flow. It's an ebb and flow. It's a constant movement, which is like, as you may know, Clarita, from class, that's why, for example, if we do, for example, a tax plan for someone, we don't just build the tax plan, give it to them and say, we wish you the best. There's a maintenance program. Why? Because life goes like this. There's going to be changes. There's going to be things they didn't anticipate that happen later in the year that's not, incorporated in the plan. And you want to be able to adjust based on those things. It's the same thing with our goals.
Thank you. And with building comes somewhat struggle, I would say. I know earlier you mentioned that you had actually started a business before and you failed in that endeavor, and you've now had, I guess, more success with this current business. Can you tell me a little bit about those struggles in your current business? I know you mentioned maybe the dealing with the part time, even though it's a successful idea. There's also, the cons to that, and also you talked about balancing. So maybe if you can touch a little bit more on that.
Sure, absolutely. So when it comes to the struggles related to part-time, for example, part-time is great, especially when individuals have other things that they want to do outside of work. But in addition to having part-time workers, the other part of business is making sure that you take great care of your current customers, right? If you're doing any advertising and you have new customers coming in, you want to make sure they have the best experience that they have. And as you know from class, we've talked about this concept of value pricing, where individuals get more than what they've paid for, but you still get what you're worth, right? They get more than what they pay for. So how do we accomplish that? We under promise, over deliver, right? We make sure that we're always taking good care of the clients. Well, think about what happens when you do that. When a client has a good experience, they're going to go out and they're going to tell their friends. They're going to go out and they're going to tell their workmates. And not all of them are going to come to you, but some of them are. And over time, that has a snowball effect. So what happens with the part-time model is you start getting in more clients because more people are interested in being a part of this experience that you've created. And the more clients you have, the more time it requires of your team. And that can start to create a strain. And then you have to get to the point where you make a decision where you say, either I'm going to get rid of this part-time model and go to full-time. I'm going to bring in more individuals on a part-time basis to handle the additional workload that we've had, or I'm going to stop taking in clients, right? So I can keep the experience what the experience is. And so each business owner has to figure out which three are they going to do. If you're starting off with part-time people, which I highly recommend, especially for new businesses, because who of us getting started can afford a full-time person? You can't, right? So are you going to move from part-time to full-time? There's some people that want full-time because they need full-time, but not everybody wants full-time work,
Mm-hmm.
especially if they can work from home,
Mm-hmm.
especially if they can work from home, right? So, but now that more clients are coming in, do I want to change my model? Do I want to go from part-time to now full-time? Or do I just want to bring in more people? Well, if you bring in more people, now you have more people to manage. Now you have more lives to juggle, right? Because people got things going on in their lives. Now you have to be more cognizant of, the attitude of team members and how that might be affecting other team members. So you may have struggles with that you're dealing with. Third, if you decide you're going to stop taking in clients, well, that's fine, but you have to make sure that you're able to maintain revenue, right? That's coming in. Because there's always going to be at least some attrition. No matter how good you are, there's always some attrition. How many are you going to allow to come in to replace attrition? And attrition is not always a negative thing. Sometimes people retire and their needs change and they no longer need your service. Sometimes people move out of the country to a life that doesn't require that they have to pay taxes anymore. So attrition is not always because they got upset with your service. Sometimes it's just life. So how do you deal with that? So these are the types of struggles that we've dealt with over the years that we've dealing with and trying to work out even currently. But there's 22 years in, there's always been a path to success. And so each business owner has to see and realize where they are in that journey and then be in a position to make the changes that they need. And I think one of the things, going back to your point about the program, that's so nice about it is you have somebody you can bounce some of those challenges off of, because it's tough when you're doing it by yourself. It's tough when you're trying to make those decisions by yourself. So if you have somebody you can bounce it off, it makes it a little easier.
Yes, it has been good being able to reach out to you when I have a decision to make or even a client to take
Mm-hmm.
on, to be able to just talk through that. Because when you're in business by yourself, I feel like I'm in a silo. So it's nice to have that support and just that network you can
Right.
reach out to. And let's talk a little bit about blossoming. What does success mean to you?
Success means being happy with what you do.
Mm,
Being happy with what you do. So for me, success is not making millions and millions of dollars. Success to me is being able to be happy with what I do, and it allows me to do other things that are important to me. So I've mentioned volunteer work a number of times during this podcast, and being able to continue to give back to my community really makes me happy. So being in a position where I can continue to do that, being in a position to allow others to be able to do that, those are the things that are of great importance to me. And also, my family is important. I don't live close to my family like I used to growing up. So, being able to go back for special occasions, anniversary parties, graduation engagements, those things mean a great deal to me, being able to be a part of. So, those are the things that help me, to be happy and to feel successful.
that's great. And would you say that right now you are blossoming? Those things are a reality?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'd add that they've been a reality for quite some time. Not that there haven't been challenges, there have.
Hmm.
But overall, absolutely. Since I left corporate, you read it in the introduction, since I left corporate in 2009, so 15 years now, that has been the experience. That's been the life I've been able to live, and I absolutely love it.
That's great. And that gives me a lot of encouragement because that is where I would like to be. I would say in some instances I'm there, at least being able to manage my own time. But seeing persons like you really gives me that push to see, it makes me realize that there is something to work towards. And so thanks so much for sharing that with us.
And you're doing great for what it's worth. You're doing
Well,
fantastic.
thank you. That means a lot to me. Thank you very much. We are going to close out now. One of the ways we like to do that is by asking if you can give us at least 3 steps or 3 practical, action items that somebody trying to start a business now they can do to get started on their journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So work hard, work smart, and be patient. Now, you specifically asked for 3 practical steps, so I don't want to leave them general. I'm going to give you examples of what I mean in all 3.
Hmm.
Work hard. That means sacrifice. So that means, especially if you have listeners that are currently in a corporate job, and we're not down on corporate jobs. I had a corporate job. So for those that have to work outside, you're working all day, you have your side business, but on the Friday night and the Saturday afternoon, when you would normally be watching Netflix, you got to turn it off and you got to work your business. It doesn't mean you can't relax. Sleep in on Saturday. Don't wake up until 10 o'clock. Fine. But in the afternoon and on Friday nights, whatever you normally would do, work on your business. Because if you're consistent with that, it will yield results. There's a great quote that I love from a boxer years ago. If you cheat in the darkness of night, you're found out under the bright lights. And what he meant was, in a boxing ring, when your opponent is coming after you, if you weren't sticking to your regimen, if you weren't eating the way you're supposed to, he's going to be knocking you around.
Mhm.
You're not going to have the stamina to keep going. And it's the same thing in business. When no one else is watching, plug away at your regiment. It will pay off. So that's work hard. And that's a practical example. Work smart. So work smart could be what we talked about earlier, is realizing it's time to bring someone on and figuring out how to do that so that you can leverage your capacity and leverage your creativity even better. Because as long as you're doing things that you're not uniquely qualified for, you're holding yourself back from being able to grow because you don't have the time or the space to be able to implement those things. But when you bring in somebody, for example, like an admin or a business partner, even if it's just for a period of time, hey, I want you to be my business partner. I want you to be my mentor for 3 months, for 6 months. Help me to get over this hump.
Mhm.
Help me to get to this particular point in my journey. That's working smart. So that's a practical example. Third, be patient. What do we mean by that? Sometimes you have to be patient with the clients and those who are prospective individuals that you're trying to work with. In our industry, and really in any industry where you're trying to get individuals to sign up for a product or service, you get a lot of no's. Some of those no's are disguised as some of the not, sometimes it's just not yet. And it's disguised as a no, but they really mean not yet.
Mhm.
We have to remember people got a lot of things going on in their life. And for those of you that are listening that are accountants, people do not like taxes. So if you're leading with I want to prepare your taxes, I want to show you how I can do a tax plan for you, they are not hearing you. Especially, if you're having a conversation in November, December, when people are thinking about holiday time, you know what I mean? They're not thinking about it. But when are they thinking about taxes? Well, when the government says you have to have a return in by such and such a date, that's your opportunity to put in your plug. When their mind is on taxes, or if you're in bookkeeping, people are thinking about bookkeeping towards the end of the year, towards the beginning of the year, because they know they got to close things out, right? Put a plug in when they're thinking about it. And if they don't immediately pull the trigger, be patient. Just be patient. We had a student, as a matter of fact, just yesterday. A client had been stringing them along for about 3 months, 4 months. They finally got tired of it and they said, look, I took your suggestion, Randy, and I tried to do this thing, and they came up with another excuse, and I decided I'm out. I said, hey, completely understand that, but try this. Try this approach and just wait. And they said, well, I've already done that. I'm not going to try it. No, I don't want it to be, it's turning into a waste of my time and I need to move on to other things. Okay. All right. So just left it alone. 3 days after she left that message, she sent another message saying they signed the contract. And this is for a long-term deal. The person just had some things that were going on in their life. They weren't paying attention. And now they are. And now she has this ongoing contract that's going to help her not only get upfront bookkeeping money for a cleanup, but ongoing revenue for the type of service that she's providing. Why? Because she was patient, because she worked on the person for 3 to 4 months. I'm working on a client right now, as a matter of fact, that I've been working on since December. He hasn't signed up yet, but I'm working on him because eventually he's going to sign up.
Mhm.
And when he does, it's going to be a very, very nice engagement. And it's going to be monthly revenue over and over and over again. So the third thing is be patient. When someone tells you no, it might be a not yet. Don't give up on them. And when they come back, if you treat them right, they'll come back eventually. And then that will help you to bridge the gap to the next engagement that you're looking for.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Considering where I am in business right now, it's good to hear those. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
good to keep that in mind. Part of what we're doing with the podcast is to build community. So we would like someone listening right now to be able to connect with guests that we've had on the show. So we would like to find out if you'd like to offer up maybe 30 minutes of your time for the first person who contacts you to and says that they heard about you through the podcast to be able to connect with you.
Absolutely, I would love to do that. So here's the best way that they can do that. My managing director, her name is Pamela Tyler, and I'm going to provide her email address. And the first individual that emails her and mentions your podcast, I will gift them a 30-minute consultation. Now, of course, anybody after that that would like to meet with me, they certainly can. And Pamela can provide the link to get in touch with me if you would like that. Because remember, it's not a cost, not if you're a business owner.
Mhm.
It's an investment in your business. So if this was valuable, think about what we can do if we're specifically focusing on your situation. That's what we want to do. And that would be an investment in your business, not a cost. But for the first person that contacts Pamela and mentions Clarita's podcast, absolutely, we will gift that 30 minutes to them. And her email address, do you want me to send it in a chat or do you want me just to call it out, Clarita?
You can call it out, and I'll also include it in the notes.
Okay, very good. Her email address is Pam, P-A-M, at cpennies.com. And cpennies is CPENNIES.com. Pam at cpennies.com.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate all the valuable information that you've given us. And I look forward to speaking with you again. And I'm sure our listeners would love to hear from you again. So I look forward to having you on another time.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Clarita, and keep up the great work you're doing.
Thank you so much. Thanks for listening to this episode of Begin, Build, Blossom, Your Business Journey, a CME Accounting LLC podcast. Please subscribe and be on the lookout for our next episode. If you'd like to share any feedback with us, please email us at podcast@cmeaccountingllc.com.